Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monae and you are watching Life is Monae. I have been stuck in my house for like a month straight and I have been missing this good summer weather, and we don't get a lot of good weather here in Washington. It's normally extremely rainy or cold, and so I wanted to get out of my house and take advantage of this weather while I still could before it got back to regular season weather. So because it's such a quiet day, I had the intentions of reading out here, and I have been doing that, but I thought right now would be the perfect time to give you guys an update on my recent reads. I have a couple of arcs that are not out yet. I'm going to give you my thoughts on those just in case you're anticipating that release, and then I have a few new releases that actually just came out, and then a couple that have been out for a bit, but we'll jump into all of that later. Let's just get started. Okay, so these are not in the order that I read them, but I just have a little pile here that I am just gonna try to make my way through. Hopefully, now that I'm looking at it, it's actually quite a bit of books. First up, we have She Who Became the Sun. This is a recent release by a debut author by the name of Shelley Parker Chan. This book I had really high expectations for, and I expected to love it. I will say that when I went into the book, I had to switch my expectations and my mindset and my understanding of the book, because it was not what I thought it was going to be, and I don't think that that's fair to hold that against the author just because I thought that the book was going to be one way just because of the way that it was marketed. And then when I got it in my hands and started reading it, I realized that that's not what the book was going to be. But that's not necessarily the author's fault. As you guys know, the authors actually don't write their own synopsis, so you know, it's hit or miss when you're buying a book based on the synopsis. In this book, we follow one character, which is a female. They are a sibling to a older brother, and there's this kind of prophet that comes to them, and they're basically trying to find out their future. And the son, which is her brother, is determined to have a destiny in life of greatness, of achieving greatness, and the sister is destined to become nothingness. And then something happens to where the brother ends up dying, and then her father ends up dying, and she's so afraid of becoming nothingness or becoming nothing that she takes on her brother's name and identity, and she is very, very desperate to survive and to not fade into nothingness. And this is historical fantasy. I will say that it's more historical than fantasy. So it's set in China in the 1300s under the Mongol Empire, and so there is a lot of historical accuracy in regards to that, and I did enjoy that about the book. One of the things that I did not necessarily like is that there is a repetitive notion in the book. So literally every 3 to 4 pages, the character is determined to not become nothingness, and it drives them forward, and that makes a lot of sense. Like in terms of the Chu Changba, which is the name that she takes on from her brother, in terms of Chu not wanting to fade into nothingness and being desperate to become something, that definitely shows through in the book, but it's repeated so many times that I feel like it disconnected me from the story, and I just had to like learn to skip over that as I was reading to like stop it from taking me out of the story. I will say that this is a lot more political, although they're in the middle of an upcoming war, and this is the first book, so there's not a lot of action. There is action. There's definitely action. People do die. There are murders. But I will say that it is similar to the Poppy War in the aspect of the war is coming about, but you also know that you're leading up to a certain point. We follow a different character named Ouyang, and their story is just as desperate, but I feel like I connected to them in a lot of ways. They are a eunuch, and so they were sentenced to basically they had their private parts removed, and they're not respected within the society that they come in. On top of that, there's a lot of other things that happens with this character, but we have this female character who's pretending to be her brother Chu Changba and trying to like assert a certain amount of masculinity that is believable because they literally have no other option. And then we have Ouyang, who is trying to like prove masculinity because that's what's respected within this society. And so you get to see both characters kind of grapple with toxic masculinity, but in like a historical setting in China. I will say that I do recommend this book. I feel like it is a very strong debut. I will be continuing with the series, but if you had expectations kind of like how I did, I will say that it's going to be hard for you to kind of reset them, because I almost DNF'd the book. Like, I read about 50 pages and then I put the book down. I was ready to take it back to the store. I was like, this is not for me. I took like a day or two break, and then I went back to it and removed all of my preconceived notions about the book. I enjoyed it, and I do feel like this is a very strong debut on behalf of the author. Next up, we have this book, and it hurts me to say, guys, I did not enjoy this book. It was not good. There's so many things. I could literally post a whole video of me ranting about the ways that this book let me down, and so I can't really explain what was wrong with the book thoroughly without spoiling it, because it is a thriller. I think that it's speculative fiction, like at best literary fiction, because there's not really a thriller or suspense or mystery aspect that has you like on the edge of your seat. It's more like a deep dive into like Black women in the workspace, and it has something to do with their hair and the way that they wear their hair. There's just, this book, it enraged me and made me a little angry. I'm not gonna lie. I was thoroughly disappointed. Not only was it marketed entirely wrong, like I said, this is not a thriller. It is not even barely a mystery. It is not suspenseful. It was so boring. For those of you who don't know what this book is about, we're following this character named Nella, who is the only Black girl at her job and the only person of color at this publishing company. And then there's a new girl hired by the name of Hazel, and Hazel is Black, and Nella expects to like be best friends with Hazel. She's very excited to have Hazel working with her, and then everything kind of starts to go south for Nella, where she feels like she's being targeted. Someone's leaving notes at her job telling her that she needs to leave, she needs to quit, and she starts getting weird vibes from Hazel, and so you kind of just explore that aspect. Nella was a very frustrating main character for the simple fact that a lot of the times in the book she is not very vocal, and it just fell flat. I know that not every woman is outspoken or very vocal or assertive in a lot of ways, and I do think that that's a bad connotation around Black women, about how we're loud and abrasive and aggressive and direct and straightforward. I understand that that's not true, and not all Black women are going to be like that, but Nella would put herself in a position to speak up and then start stuttering. It just did not feel realistic, because if you're not confrontational or you don't like being put in the hot seat, you wouldn't do anything to draw attention to yourself, or you wouldn't speak up at all. I don't understand the point of putting yourself out there as if you're going to speak up, and then you can't form a single coherent thought when people call on you. That was just very, very frustrating, and the twist point of this book was very frustrating, and the ending of this book was very frustrating. And so I'm going to say that, like, if you bought this book, go get your money back. The only reason I still own it is because I was planning on filming this video. I may do a more in-depth review of what I thought about this book, but I will say, if you bought this book, return it. Chances are you're not gonna like it. I haven't seen anyone say they absolutely loved it. At best, people say that they're confused. It was a little boring and they're confused about the ending, but it wasn't horrible. And then at worst, people hate this book, and I think I'm more so on the hateful end. So I don't foresee anybody really thoroughly enjoying this book, and that's very hard for me to say, because a lot of the books that I hate, I anticipate that someone else will love or may like in some way. But this one is weird because I don't see anybody liking this one. And there's also one more in this pile that I'm like, if you like this book, I have serious questions, because we need to talk. But yeah, this was a 1 star. Next up, I have an arc, which is Visaprey. This is another debut novel by a new author by the name of Ayana Gray. We follow a young girl named Kofi, who is an indentured servant at this night zoo that's kind of like in the jungle. And we also follow a character named Akan, who is a part of this brotherhood that kind of polices the village and the town that they live in. Something happens to where they are on the same path, and they must depend on each other to hunt down this beast that lives within the village that's kind of like this materialized folklore or mythological beast that everybody's afraid of. And there's people in the village that are dying at the hands of this beast. So they set off on this very deadly hunt to find this beast. They have different purposes for wanting to find them, and so they're lying to each other about what they actually plan to do when they find this beast. Along the way, they discover a lot more about their history and their heritage, and they discover that they are not necessarily being told the truth by the people who have set them on this course. They must decide what's best for them, and in total what's best for the entire kingdom, because a lot of dominoes fall, and so they're left pretty much holding the bag, trying to figure out where to go next. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. I really thought that we were going to focus on the jungle aspect and the different animals, which was also really cool. I really love the depictions of the beasts in this book. I feel like Ayana does a very good job of making them seem deadly while also making them mysterious and like mythologically based. That was very interesting. And then there were a couple animals that are beasts that I felt like was a little weird. I'm like, how are we coming up with this? As I was reading, I came across one beast that sounded familiar to me, that I had heard before, but I wasn't really sure, so I ended up Googling it, and it was actually a beast from African folklore. And I found out through research that almost all of the beasts in this book actually exist in one type of African descent folklore or myth throughout the world. And so when this is pitched as Pan-African, I really think that it is, because there's something in this book for everybody that's a part of the African diaspora across the world. You can tell that the setting is in Africa, but I don't think that it's wholly centered around that alone. I feel like the dynamics between the two characters really reflect the diaspora as well. And the hair that every character in this book has, you know that every character in this book is black. We have anything from twist outs to dreads to high top fades to waves to curls. The hair game in this book, I can't wait for the art depictions to come out, because the way that everybody's hair was described in this book was just what stuck with me the most, because I was like, this book is blackity black, and not just only for one specific group of black people, but like all black people. And I just love that. On top of that, the story moved away from like the jungle aspect, and it really blossomed and like expanded in ways that I did not expect it to, which made me enjoy it even more, because what the book is pitched as, you have a certain expectation about what's going to happen. And I feel like this is one of those books where not only does it give you what it says it was going to give you, it also gave a little more. I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5. I will be continuing with the series, of course, and I feel like this is another really strong debut. Like, the next book that I have is going to be Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. I've been wanting to read Veronica Roth for a while. This is my first book by her. I never read the Divergent series, and I have to say that I enjoyed it. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5. So in this book, in this world, it's kind of like a dystopia, because they're in America, and so I don't know what the timeline is. I believe that it's set in like 2014 or 2016, and so we have these 5 people who were prophesied to save the world when this dark one came, and the dark one came and kind of caused these catastrophic like black hole warp events where people just started disappearing. And these kids, there was this person who prophesied who the chosen one was going to be, and the US government looked at the prophecy and the qualifications for the chosen one, and so they started pulling kids who they felt like fit the description, and they pulled about 5 or 6 of them, and then among the 5 or 6, one of them was actually the true chosen one, but they all kind of form a team and helped each other. So this happened like 10 years ago. So we followed these child prodigies as they're adults and dealing with the aftermath of saving the world, what that looks like. We have one person who kind of leans into it and becomes like a social media girl and like a social media influencer, and she uses her fame to kind of like propel her career. You have another character who feels so moved by the injustices in the world. They use their platform as like a political stepping stone and to spearhead different like social justice movements. We have a couple of characters who really struggle with what they went through in the past and like getting over it. So there is a character who's like has a drug addiction, like alcohol addiction, depression. Like there's so many things with every character in this book that were a part of the chosen one. They deal with what happened in the past, and so there's this kind of like ominous thing in the book where the chosen one, the dark one that they were supposed to be defeating, he was defeated, but they never actually saw his body. So one of our characters is really unsure about whether or not the dark one is actually gone. Something happens in this book where they got where they get pulled into like a parallel universe, and that parallel universe is experiencing their own dark one, and they have pulled our chosen ones from the timeline that we're in into their timeline because they want our chosen ones to save them. And so they're questioning whether or not the dark one in this parallel universe is the same dark one from theirs. And there's this whole unlocking of magic, and also the question of whether or not they're even up to the task of taking on another dark one, because taking on the last dark one nearly destroyed them, and they lost a lot of comrades along the way. Some of them are not okay, some of them will never be okay, and so why should they bother to save a parallel universe that has nothing to do with them? We follow a very peculiar main character because Sloane is one angry person. She's very upset and like pissed off about having to be the chosen one, having to be selected, about dealing with everything that she went through in the past. She keeps a lot of her feelings and her thoughts to herself, and it comes off as like aggression to other people. And so a lot of the characters of the world around her get very frustrated with her and like annoyed dealing with her because everything just comes out super abrasive. And I feel like a little bit throughout the book I was even annoyed, just like, why are you always so mad? I feel like at the end of the book I learned a lot about her. I came around to actually liking her, and I also feel like the ending of this book was explosive in a lot of ways. I love the way this book ended. I am excited for book 2. I feel like from that type of ending, like, you gotta come strong with book 2, because I have been thinking about the ending of this book, and I need to talk to someone who's also read The Chosen Ones, because yeah, we need to discuss. The next book that I read was Instructions for Dancing. This is a new release by Nicola Yoon, and this is the first book that I've read. I also purchased Everything, so I will be reading that one next, but this was the first one that I read. I did not really enjoy this book. I didn't hate it. Let's just talk about what the book is about. In this book, we follow this character named Evie. Evie's parents are going through a divorce, and Evie becomes very cynical about love, and she pretty much is like, what's the point, because all love ends in heartbreak anyway. And so something happens to where she gets this ability to foresee visions, and she can see how every relationship is going to end once she sees a couple kiss, and that makes her even more cynical about love because she can see how everybody is going to break up. So she doesn't see the point in even trying to start a relationship or love with anyone. And on top of her dealing with the breakup of her parents and her father's getting remarried, and she's just angry. She feels like nobody's really reacting to the destruction of their lives the way that they're supposed to. And there's also close relationships and best friends that she has that are in relationships that she knows is going to end, so that makes it harder for her. And then she meets this guy at like this dancing studio, and they enter this competition together, and they must learn to like dance to win this competition that they're entering. And something sparks between Evie and her dance partner X, but she's also like, again, cynical about love, so she pushes it away for a long time. The book ends kind of wild for a romance. I feel like it ends kind of like on a tragic note, which, I mean, if you like that kind of thing, maybe you'll like this book. I just feel like for the book to be less than 300 pages and for us to be exploring her learning how to dance, her falling for this partner, her dealing with her mom and dad's divorce, her dad being remarried, her mom dating, her sister in a relationship that's gonna fail, two of her best friends in a relationship that's gonna fail, X's grandparents are married and there's something that happens in their relationship too. It's just, there were so many points that we were following in less than 300 pages, and it really took away from like the main point of the story. I feel like everything was kind of touched on and nothing was really explored in depth. And so I feel like I probably would have enjoyed this book more if it was longer, or if we weren't following so many potential relationships. And I get that like the point is to look at all relationships and all loves, but I just feel like, again, it just wasn't fleshed out and thoroughly explored the way that I would have wanted it to in order for me to be satisfied. So yeah, that definitely took away from the point of the book. But if you like romance books, or if you like books that have like a twist or unexpected turn, maybe you'll like Instructions for Dancing. But I will say, don't go into this book expecting a lot of dancing to be happening, because that's pretty much maybe 1/5 of the book is them dancing, and 1/5 is generous. So the next book that I have is a new release by a debut author. We are on fire with the new releases and the brand new authors right now, and that is going to be Falling. This book was a fun time. It is a thriller that gave thrill. Okay, I had a grand time reading this book. We're following this pilot by the name of Bill. Bill's family, his wife and his 2 kids, are taken hostage as he is aboard a plane, and as he's flying he finds out that pretty much there's a ransom for his family, and in order for his family to not be murdered and to be let go, Bill must crash the plane wherever these hijackers are telling him to crash it. And so he must decide between saving his wife and his kids or killing a plane of 144 innocent passengers. The hijackers back at home with the family, so there's really no way for him to get to them. And on top of that, there's someone on the plane that's working for the hijackers that's anonymous, that's going to let them know if Bill tries to do anything to thwart their plans. And so that just raised the tension for me. Me and Chanel from Chanel Time, we read this book, and she also really enjoyed it. I think she gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 because I feel like for a debut book, like, this is a book that's super short. You can read it in one sitting and you will have a good time. Like, Monty even read the book. I think Monty gave it a 4 out of 5, and you guys know that Monty is like a really, really tough critic and he even had a good old time reading this book. So it's not my usual go-to type of book, but I am glad that I read it, and I hope to see more from TJ Newman because this book was a fun time. Because it is so short, I don't want to go into details as to what happens in this book because I feel like that takes away from it. But even with it being less than 300 pages, I feel like she understood the assignment. She gave what needed to be given in them 280 pages, and she left no stone unturned, and we love to see that. The next book that I have is going to be The Woman in the Window. I have many thoughts about this book. This book follows a therapist who has agoraphobia, and so she cannot leave her house, and she witnesses a crime at her neighbor's house because she's a little peeping Tom, and she watches everybody from their homes because she can't leave her house, so she lives vicariously through her neighbors. It is now a Netflix movie. If you're interested, I highly say just go with the Netflix movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't think you could be missing much. If anything, the only thing they could do is make it better in the movie, because this book is a thriller. It is 460 pages, and I just feel like that is too long for a thriller. 460 pages is a lot, especially because the crime that she is up in arms about happens less than 100 pages in. So you just watch her for 350 pages go insane and lose her mind, and she's trapped in a very secluded environment, and so her interactions with outside people is very limited, and she also has agoraphobia, so it's not like she can go out investigating. We're just watching her watch people in their window. It was kind of boring, very, very boring. And then I want to say about 40% in, I predicted the twist. And there are a couple twists in this book. I predicted every single one. So for me, it wasn't worth reading the almost 500 pages because the payoff was just not there for me in the end, because I foresaw all of this happening. Is that a bad thing? No, because I have read some thrillers where the ending came out of nowhere. It made absolutely no sense. So for the author to set up the twist or all the different twists in this book, and I can foreshadow it and kind of see it coming, okay, cool. But it really took away from my enjoyment because, like I said, there are several plot twists and I anticipated every single one. So it wasn't giving what it was supposed to give. And I may have still even enjoyed it more if I wasn't so thoroughly bored out of my mind for the 400 pages that it took everything to happen. Because as you guys know, thrillers really pop off at the end, so you'll be waiting a long time to get the payoff for this book. Next and least, the books we hated the most is going to be The Maidens and The Silent Patient. Me and Chanel was on a thriller reading marathon, and we're actually still doing it right now. We're reading For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing right now, and so we picked up The Maidens, and this was such a horrible time. I read this book and it was utterly terrible. Like, I don't even have the time to get into what was wrong with this book, but definitely go on Goodreads, read reviews from me, Monty, Jesse from Bow Ties and Books also reviewed it on their channel, so you guys could watch it and see everything that's wrong. You'll even see me in the comments ranting on my own. But in this book, we have a character named Mariana. Mariana is a group therapist, and her niece is at this campus. And so at the campus, someone is murdered, and the niece asks Mariana to come up and to just be there with her to do what, I don't know, because Mariana can't protect against a killer, but her niece wants her to come to this campus because that would just make her niece feel better about being at a campus where someone died. As Mariana's there, she sees this professor that everybody at the school absolutely loves, and the professor has a group of hand-picked students who are called the Maidens, and they're really beautiful, high elite members of society. They're all girls from like prestigious families with bright futures, and he pretty much has a very private relationship with them, and that makes Mariana nervous. And one of the girls who died was a maiden, and then other maidens at the school starts being murdered too, and so Mariana is determined to prove that the professor is the killer of these girls, although no one believes her and no one even suspects him, and he has alibis for a couple of the murders, but she goes insane trying to prove that this man is the murderer of these girls. If you're going to read this book because you think it's a dark academia, it's not. It's not a dark academia. I don't even want to explore that. If you're going to read this book because you like the idea of a professor and these like cult-like students, don't do that, because we don't see them very much, because the point of view is from Mariana, and Mariana is doing her own thing, and Mariana is not a part of the Maidens, and they're like onto her, so she kind of gets on their nerves. So we probably see her interact with the Maidens 2, maybe 3 times. If you're going into it for the professor, I can tell you to save your time. This book, like the twist of this book was terrible. I don't know why anybody would see that as a twist and be like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, pedophilia, I don't like it. I'm not here for it. I just started reading a bunch of thrillers, and I've been told that like pedophilia is like a norm in thrillers in terms of like it being a twist, and I don't know why, but this one was just very poorly done. And when we have the killer revealed, there are explanations for killing, because like I anticipated who the murderer was in this book, and so that's fine, cool. I anticipated the murder, but it was shorter. I wasn't as bored as I was with the woman in the window, although this is kind of boring too, but again, it's shorter, so we got to the point quicker. The reasons behind why this murderer wanted to kill these people, asinine, made absolutely no sense. I don't know why anybody would think that. This book is a writing exercise. I feel like this author wrote The Silent Patient and it was a hit and everybody loved it, and maybe he was bored during COVID and he wanted to explore the characters in his book, maybe write potential backstories for other characters, and so just started writing one day, and they threw a price tag on this writing exercise. I feel like authors explore other characters in their multiverse all the time, but they don't publish that shit, and this is proof of why they shouldn't. So moving into The Silent Patient, this was, I guess you could say, better than The Maidens, but not by far. Everybody's like, oh, read The Silent Patient because that's the better book. I can't believe that Alex wrote The Maidens because it feels so different from The Silent Patient. It's not. He could have went in on the other side from this in this book. A lot of the characters in The Maidens and The Silent Patient could be swapped entirely and you would have the same outcome. Like, literally the same outcome. And in this book, we have a character named Theo who is a psychotherapist. He goes to work at this medical facility so that he can work with a particular client by the name of Alicia. Alicia shot her husband in the face 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and has never spoken a word since. And he's determined to be the one to get her talking again and to find out why she shot her husband in the face. If you question why a psychotherapist would be so enraptured with a woman to go and like get hired where she works to only work with her, like he doesn't become her therapist. He becomes a therapist at the facility, but only works with her. And I feel like that should have been a dead giveaway that he should be fired because he's neglecting to do his job. And then on top of that, he has a very clear obsession with Alicia. that his coworkers and his superiors find funny. They find it doting. They're like, oh, she put her tricks on you. You're in love with her. Y'all have you're falling. You have feelings for her. She has feelings for you. If I am a director of a mental facility and I have people's well-being and their mental livelihood in my hands, not only am I not going to hire a therapist who will only work with one when I've hired him to work with multiple people, if I hear a whiff of a rumor that my therapist may be romantically involved with their patient, your ass is as good as grass. You're fired. Because where is the ethical lines, the professionalism? It was too much. And they thought it was funny. And I don't get the jokey joke at all. If you're gonna read a book by Alex, I say make it The Silent Patient. Is it good? No. But you'll have not even a better time. It's slightly better than the Maidens. So if you have to pick one, read this one. But if you can go through life without reading from this author at all, I highly suggest that you do it, because this was a mess. And I can't believe that people really loved this. It just felt very unrealistic. And if it was realistic, I hope that there are not therapists out there who are doing this shit. That can't pass. Okay, last but not least, I read Jade Legacy. This book will be out in November, so I'm not gonna spoil it too much for you guys, but this book gave what needed to be gave. Fonda Lee did what needed to be done. I had a checklist of things that I needed to happen by the end of this book, and they were all checked off. I will say that this is very high. Like, if you've read Jade War and Jade City, this one is very political, and it dives deeper into the political aspects than Jade War did. But it's also action packed. We do have a lot of killings and murders, and like a lot of things happen in this book. I feel like this is like if Jade City and Jade War got together and had a baby. This is it, which is not a small accomplishment for an author, because if you take book 2 in a completely different direction from book 1, and half of your fandom loves book 1 and the other half of your fandom loves book 2, normally somebody is going to be disappointed by the time you get the finale. But I feel like the author did a good fan service by giving each lover something in this book that they appreciated from the first 2, and also giving it more and taking it up a notch. And so I'm excited for you guys to read this. I feel like in terms of a series conclusion, a trilogy conclusion, this is a really good one. I normally don't love a trilogy finale. I have better times with like a duology ending than I do with like a quartet or a trilogy. So this one I had a great time with. You guys make sure you pick it up and check it out. Okay, so throughout this video, the sun shifted a lot of times, and I guess that's just what happens when you're dealing with natural lighting. But I will see you guys next time. Bye.